This week we take a look at a corruption deck with just a splash of purple for extra control. In the right hands, this deck can beat anything out there.
Toss the bucket.
Welcome to another episode of Spellweaver Deck Tech, where we take a look at Nosalzeuhl's corruption deck with a splash of purple. He's a fellow streamer, so I'm going to post his stats up on the screen right there, and you can check out a link to his Twitch channel in the description below. Be sure to check that guy out and follow him. He's an amazing Spellweaver. Let's start off by taking a look at the hero of the deck, which everything falls under. In this case, it is Nefaros Necromantic Prince. This is the advanced corruption hero with the skill of occultism. Whenever a creature dies on that same turn, you can pay 3 mana, provided you have 3 levels, that's 2 in corruption and 1 in something else, and you can return it to the field under your control. Now you lose 2 life in the process, but that creature can't be taken back, such as the case of Helm and Dominion, where that artifact is destroyed. It's yours permanently until it dies. The cool thing is you can use creatures from your graveyard or your opponent's graveyard. This becomes a very key tempo swing in the late game. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of the deck. We've got 22 creatures, starting with Shadowstep Assassin. Now Shadowstep Assassin is deadly, and it is a 3-speed creature, so this can work in your early game. However, keep in mind that with only 2 health, it's probably not going to survive more than 1 attack. This can also be used for those large minion, large creature removals in mid to late game as well. So there's 4 of these, and they work early, mid, and late game. It's a very nice card to have, and you have to think of this card as essentially one of your 1-for-1 removals, if you will. And next we have Lord Karthus Deathspeaker. There's only 2 of these in the deck because, well, it's a legendary, and you can only play 1 at a time, and you wouldn't want your hand full of Lord Karthus. However, it's an extremely powerful card. It has an immediate impact on the board, killing any creature you choose. It is a 4/4 body. It helps you with that survivability to bring you into your late game, and anytime any other creature dies while Lord Karthus is present, you get 2 extra life. There's some other mechanisms that we haven't talked about yet, such as Bloodwitch Harpy and Restless Tombs. That's a combo in and of your own deck that can actually feed Lord Karthus as well. So there's a lot going for this card, and it allows you to not only bring a win condition, but a survivability condition. Next, we'll talk about the corruption creatures in this deck, starting off with Plague Vermin. There are 4 Plague Vermin in this deck, and you'd be hard-pressed to find any corruption deck that doesn't run Plague Vermin because of its sheer value. This is essentially a removal card. Think of it as an instant spell, if you will. There's not much to say about this card other than it can be played on turn 1, and it can sacrifice itself to do 1 damage. Or it can attack or block, either way. Moving on to the Mesmerizing Spirit. Now there are 4 Mesmerizing Spirits in here, and this is a tech card. So you can mess around with the numbers or replace this card potentially depending on your playstyle. Mesmerizing Spirit is here to just essentially be an annoyance to your opponent by making them discard a card, and sometimes this can be very valuable when they've got 1 or 2 cards in their hand. It can be a key tempo swing in those clutch situations. It's also a 2/1 body that can be used for a block as well. And next we're going to talk about the Bloodwitch Harpy. There's 4 Bloodwitch Harpies, and these are crucial in your aggro decks, especially your Red Rush decks, or potentially your nature decks if you're having a lot of problems with those little pesky elves. Any level 1 creature is subjected to Bloodwitch Harpy sacrifice potentially. Now the downside is, of course, your enemy can gain 1 mana by sacrificing. However, that's a much lesser evil because they will have no board presence or a lesser board presence, and only giving them 1 mana isn't that big of a deal. This also helps you out by bumping up your mana pool as well. Bloodwitch Harpy is difficult to remove because she sits on the support line as well. I would not recommend attacking with Bloodwitch Harpy unless you're absolutely certain that she will not die. Keep in mind this is also a fireball magnet because Red Rush hates this card. Succubus. The last of the creatures in this deck, and there are 4 Succubus. It is expensive. It does cost 3 levels, and it does cost 4 mana. However, there's a lot of bounce mechanisms in this deck, and when she enters the field, your enemy loses 4, and you gain 4 life. That's an 8 life swing. That's absolutely amazing. And if you're using the hero power of occultism, you're getting 8 life, and you're taking 8 life away. That's a 16-point swing. Absolutely amazing. There's also other bounce mechanisms in this particular deck that we'll talk about, so this is absolutely the star of the show, and this is definitely a late game finisher. Next up, we're going to talk about the spells. Now, there's only 14 spells in this deck, and it doesn't need a lot. Essentially, they're removal spells, and this is mostly for early game. Now, first we have Cataclysm. There are 3 Cataclysms in here, and this is kind of the, oh crap, I'm in trouble card. And it's generally played mid to late game. It does not work well against the rush because by the time you have enough mana and levels to get out Cataclysm, you're probably already dead. It's a little bit too late. However, this can really help in some of those mid-game swings where you're losing ground, and it can really switch the game quickly and bring you right back into it. Next, we've got Noxious Fumes. Most, if not all, corruption decks run Noxious Fumes because, again, like Plague Vermin, it only costs 1 mana, it's 1 level, but in this case, it does -2 attack and -2 health. This is absolutely overpowered, in my opinion. Actually, I'm not going to say that, because if any devs are watching this, I don't want them to change this card. It's great. The only thing that would make it better would be an instant spell. And according to one of the devs I was talking to earlier, in pre-alpha, this actually was an instant spell, and it was deemed too overpowering then, and has been changed to just an action spell. Let's hope they don't nerf it again. Restless Tombs. There are 3 Restless Tombs. In some corruption decks, this is a win condition, or a potential win condition, and there were 4. In this case, there's only 3. We do want to draw into Restless Tombs, but it is not critical to winning, although it is nice to spam a bunch of zombies on the board. Zombies are very slow. They're 1 speed, so they don't have a lot of utility other than hitting the face, or sacrificing to the Bloodwitch Harpy to gain an extra mana. Now keep in mind, if Lord Karthus is on the board, and Bloodwitch Harpy, and Restless Tombs, you're summoning a zombie, giving 1 extra mana via Bloodwitch Harpy, and by killing it, you're also giving yourself 2 life with Lord Karthus' ability. Some of these combos can get pretty out of hand. It's absolutely amazing and fun to play. And next we've got Reanimate. 4 Reanimates. Why? Well, for the Succubus. This is another bounce factor along with the Occultism, which is the hero skill that allows us to bounce that Succubus back and forth again and again until you win. Plain and simple. Now, Reanimate can help you bring out things like Lord Karthus as well. Try not to use Reanimate for something like a Plague Vermin, which has much lesser value, but whatever you need to pull out of your graveyard, anything from your graveyard you can select. It does not have to happen on this turn. So, that brings up an interesting situation. If you play a Succubus, and then you sacrifice that Succubus, and then you use Occultism on that turn to bring Succubus back, she can die the following turn, and then you can reanimate again, and I think you see where I'm going with this. You can win in a few turns by simply gaining life or killing your opponent with nothing more than a Succubus. Now this deck only has 1 artifact card, and it runs 2 of them. It's called Helm of Dominion. You're probably familiar with this because it's extremely annoying when someone plays Helm of Dominion on you, and that's why it's in this deck. However, there's only 2 of them because they're kind of situational cards, if you will. It does put a weakness emblem on there, but it really doesn't matter because you're removing that enemy from their control. And if your artifact is removed, then it goes back to the enemy's control. But all in all, this is a tempo card that really removes that big creature that you just can't seem to get around. So there's 2 of these in the deck. Last but not least, let's talk about the shrines in this deck. Now this is a 60-card deck. However, it's running 22 shrines, which is a little bit higher than usual. The general ratio or rule of thumb is a 60-card deck runs 20 shrines. 22 increases the chance of drawing into a shrine a little bit more, plus there is no other card draw in this deck other than the shrines themselves, so you want to be able to cycle your cards as much as possible. That's always key in any deck. So there are 6 basic Dominion shrines, and you need 2 Dominion levels for your highest cards, and those are Cataclysm and Lord Karthus. In addition, there are 3 other Dominion shrines for a total of 9, and this is Stronghold of Metropolis. Now, I know in my decks that I build, I like to run 2 skill shrines, 2 of every skill shrine, not 3. However, these are very critical to the core mechanics of this deck. Sell into slavery. Let's talk about this one. It requires 1 Dominion level. Fair enough, that's easy. It requires 0 mana. That's right, 0 mana. Costs nothing. And the cooldown is 1 turn. In other words, you can use this every turn. So when I was talking about the Succubus earlier, sacrificing the Succubus and bouncing her back and forth, this is one of the mechanisms that does this. So this is critical to having this in your hand, and which is why there are 3 of these instead of 2. Of course, you don't want to flood too many Stronghold Metropolis because you can only use this once. This is absolutely amazing in this deck, and it is not something that is found in most decks, but it works really well with this particular core style mechanic. Now, we have 3 Sanctum of the Void. Now, this is on the corruption side. Sanctum of the Void is essentially a removal spell, if you will, but it's a skill. Now, this is expensive. It requires 3 levels, and it requires 2 mana, and it has a cooldown of 3. Let me show you why. The enemy hero sacrifices a creature, and you gain 2 life. Now, the enemy hero gets to choose who. However, if you can whittle the board down to that one big creature that you just can't get rid of, like, say, a Hydra or something, or a dragon that's on the support line, it's flying, and you can't reach it, Soul Prism will reach it. You just have to make sure you clear the rest of the board off. So this is absolutely amazing and is key to having in your hand. So again, we run 3 of these instead of 2. And then there's 10 Corruption Shrines. Why? Because, well, the deck is mostly Corruption, and you need to be cycling cards as fast as possible. So there it is, folks. The Corruption deck that has no name, the Corruption deck with a splash of purple. Perhaps Nosalzeuhl will give us a name to this deck in the meantime. I hope you enjoy it. It's going to be fun. I guarantee it. Let me know if you have any questions. Post in the comments below, and I'll see you next week.